There's a moment in life that many of us can't name, but we feel it. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself with drama or pain. It's a subtle ache that follows us into adulthood. The way we shut down when someone gets too close. The way we laugh it off when we really want to cry. The way we chase people who never stay or push away the ones who do. What if this wasn't just how we are, but a message from a part of us that never grew up? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Deep within each of us, hidden beneath layers of responsibility and maturity, lives a part of the psyche Jung called the inner child. Not a literal child, but a psychological image, an archetype, formed by early experiences. How we were loved, how we were hurt, how we made sense of the world when our minds were still soft and wide open. This inner child doesn't speak in words. It shows up in the way we react without thinking, in the fears that don't make sense, in the tears we don't understand, and in the patterns we keep repeating, even when we swear we've learned. Most people try to fix these things with surface solutions, self-help tricks, productivity hacks, or pretending to be stronger. But none of that touches the original wound. In this video, we'll go into the forgotten corner of the psyche where the inner child lives, silently influencing everything from our relationships to our self-worth. We'll uncover how childhood wounds are not just memories, but living forces, shaping your reality until you face them. Let's begin that journey. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind, he mapped it. He believed the psyche wasn't just a product of our personal memories, but part of a vast shared blueprint he called the collective unconscious. Inside this collective realm are what he called archetypes, universal patterns of human experience: the mother, the shadow, the wise old man, the trickster, and yes, the child. The inner child is one of the most powerful and misunderstood archetypes. It represents innocence, vulnerability, wonder, but also fear, abandonment, and unhealed pain. It's the part of us that felt everything too deeply before we knew how to explain it, before we knew how to protect ourselves. Think back, not to what happened in your childhood, but to how it felt. The loneliness in a room full of people, the confusion when love was given conditionally, the fear of being too much or not enough. Jung didn't view these feelings as just memories locked in the past. He saw them as living energy, stored in the unconscious, shaping how we move through the world. This child becomes a phantom, silently pulling strings behind our adult mask. You might be 40, 50, 70 years old, yet still reacting like the 6-year-old who wasn't picked, still shrinking when criticized, still needing permission to feel loved. The inner child is not weak, it's wounded and smart. It builds defenses, personas, and coping mechanisms that help you survive. But survival isn't the same as wholeness. Jung believed true transformation only begins when we stop running from these inner figures and start listening, not to fix them, but to understand them. Because the child you once were didn't disappear, it became part of you, buried, but still breathing. So when your reactions feel too big, when your fears seem irrational, when a small comment hurts more than it should, it might not be your adult self reacting. It might be that child, still waiting to be seen. In the next section, we'll explore how forgotten wounds don't stay buried, but rise again and again, until they are finally acknowledged. There's a paradox at the heart of healing. The very thing we most want to forget is often the thing that shapes us the most. We imagine our childhood as something we outgrow. We move on. We get jobs. We build relationships. We tell ourselves, that was then. I'm different now. But are we? Carl Jung warned that the unconscious doesn't forget. It remembers everything, not in words, but in patterns. The pain of not being chosen becomes the pattern of choosing unavailable people. The fear of being abandoned becomes the obsession with controlling others. The early belief that I must perform to be loved becomes a lifetime of burnout. These are not random problems. They are replays of a forgotten emotional script, written long ago when you were too young to defend yourself, too small to understand that someone else's neglect wasn't your fault. This is where the inner child speaks, not through memories, but through reactions. You overreact to small things because a much younger part of you feels threatened. You sabotage good things because deep down, you don't believe you deserve them. You feel unworthy even when others admire you, because somewhere, long ago, love was tied to conditions. And here's the truth Jung understood. What stays unconscious will rule your life. You won't recognize it as a wound. You'll call it your personality. I'm just not good in relationships. I've always had trust issues. I guess I'm just lazy. No, you're not broken. You're protecting an old wound you were never allowed to grieve. Jung saw this clearly in his patients. He said many of their struggles weren't rooted in adulthood, but in unresolved developmental stages. They weren't dealing with current problems. They were reliving old injuries in a new form. Healing, then, isn't about learning new tricks. It's about remembering what you were forced to forget. The unmet needs, the silenced emotions, the moments when you had to choose safety over truth. And it's not about blaming anyone. Most wounds weren't created out of cruelty, but out of absence. An emotionally unavailable parent, a home where vulnerability wasn't safe, a world that demanded you grow up too fast. The child inside you didn't just disappear. It adapted, it coped, it hid. But it never stopped hoping you'd come back for it one day, and that day can be today. In the next section, we'll ask a simple but powerful question. When does the inner child take control? Because the more aware you become of its presence, the less power it has over you in the dark. You've probably heard the phrase emotional trigger, a moment when something small makes you feel something big, too big. A tone of voice that suddenly makes you feel worthless, a delay in response that floods you with panic, a criticism that leaves you shattered for days. These moments don't come from your adult self. They come from the child within who still believes they are in danger. Carl Jung believed that we don't truly grow until we become conscious of the parts within us that never did. And the inner child is often the one holding the wheel when our reactions seem irrational, exaggerated, or even self-destructive. Let's break this down. The adult you understands logic. The adult you can rationalize they're just busy or it's not personal. But the inner child doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of emotion, raw, intense, and deeply rooted in the past. So what does it look like when your inner child takes control? You might panic when someone pulls away, because as a child, withdrawal meant abandonment. feel rage when someone sets a boundary, because childhood boundaries felt like rejection. Overachieve endlessly, because love was something you had to earn, never something you were simply given. These responses aren't bad, they're survival strategies, but they're based on a world that no longer exists. Here's the painful irony. The very behaviors that once kept you safe, shutting down, people-pleasing, staying silent, are now the same ones keeping you stuck. And most people never realize this, because the inner child doesn't knock politely. It hijacks your nervous system. You don't decide to panic or withdraw. It happens instantly, like a reflex. Jung referred to this as being possessed by a complex, a fragment of the psyche with its own agenda, its own emotions, and its own story. When a complex is triggered, it takes over. You're no longer responding to the present, you're reacting to the past. But here's the shift Jung offered. When you notice the child taking control, not with judgment but with curiosity, you reclaim your power. Instead of spiraling, you pause, you ask, what is this part of me afraid of? You listen, you stay, you offer the presence that was missing long ago. That's not weakness, that's integration. It's the beginning of becoming whole. In the next part, we'll explore what it really means to face the invisible wound and how to approach the inner child, not as a problem to fix, but as a forgotten companion finally ready to speak. Most people try to heal by thinking their way out of pain. They analyze their past, read books, listen to advice, and while all of that can be useful, it often misses one crucial truth. The inner child doesn't want to be understood. It wants to be felt. It wants to be heard. Carl Jung believed that healing was not about fixing the psyche like a broken machine, but about entering into dialogue with the parts of ourselves we've silenced. This is where real transformation begins, not with analysis but with relationship. So how do you start a dialogue with the inner child? Not by talking down to it, not by trying to logic it away, but by sitting beside it. You begin by recognizing when that younger part of you shows up. You pause and ask, who is speaking right now? Is it the grounded adult or the scared child who once felt invisible? Jung often emphasized the importance of making the unconscious conscious. That doesn't mean digging for trauma. It means noticing how old pain still lives inside new experiences. Start small. When you overreact to rejection, can you pause and ask, what is this really reminding me of? When you're flooded with shame, can you ask, when was the first time I felt this way? You're not trying to solve anything in that moment. You're trying to connect. This is what the inner child truly needs. Your attention, not your judgment. Your presence, not your perfection. Maybe no one ever comforted you when you cried. Then you become that person now. Maybe you were punished for being sensitive. Then you protect that sensitivity now. Not by hardening, but by honoring it. Some people resist this kind of work because it feels awkward. They say, why would I talk to a younger version of myself? But the truth is, you already are. Every time you react with fear, every time you self-sabotage, every time you feel unseen, the child is speaking. What changes is when you start listening. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating every part of who you are, including the ones you left behind. This doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming whole. The invisible wound becomes visible not through force, but through gentle attention. And that attention creates space for healing, for integration, for peace. In the next part, we'll explore the practical steps to reconnect with your inner child in daily life, so you can stop reacting from the wound and start responding from the whole self. The idea of reparenting yourself may sound strange at first. How can you be both the child and the parent at once? But Carl Jung would argue, you already are. Within you lives the hurt child, yes, the one who wasn't seen, heard, or protected. But within you also lives the wise adult, the part that can now offer what was once missing. Reparenting is not about blaming your real parents. It's not about rewriting history. It's about finally stepping into a role that no one else can fill, the role of inner caretaker. So what does reparenting actually look like? Let's begin with the basics. When your inner child is scared, you soothe, not by dismissing, but by listening. You don't say, "You shouldn't feel this way." You say, "It makes sense that you feel this way. I'm here now." When your inner child feels shame, you protect. You set boundaries with people who mistreat you. You say no to environments that drain you. You stop abandoning yourself to be accepted by others. When your inner child feels alone, you stay. Not by numbing or distracting, but by sitting in silence, placing a hand on your heart and saying, "I won't leave you this time." These aren't grand gestures. They're simple acts of inner loyalty, repeated daily, consistently, gently. Jung knew that the unconscious doesn't respond to ideas. It responds to experience. So each time you prioritize rest over overworking, allow yourself to cry without apology, celebrate small efforts instead of criticizing imperfections, you send a message to your nervous system. The world is safer now. You are not alone. You don't have to perform to be loved. This is how the psyche begins to reorganize itself, not through force, but through consistent inner care. You may still feel pain, but now you know how to hold it. You may still get triggered, but now you recognize who is speaking, and you respond, not react. This is the true gift of reparenting. You become the person you always needed. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And slowly, the inner child begins to trust you. It comes out of hiding. It starts to feel again, joy, curiosity, softness. Because now it knows you're not going anywhere. In the next section, we'll explore how the healed inner child becomes a source of power. Not a weakness, but a wellspring of creativity, intuition, and emotional depth. You'll see how embracing this forgotten part of you can actually unlock your fullest potential. Most people associate the inner child with weakness. They think of it as the fragile, wounded part that needs to be fixed. But Carl Jung saw something radically different. He believed that beneath the pain of the inner child lies immense power, a wellspring of creativity, intuition, and emotional truth. And once we stop trying to suppress that child, we begin to rediscover the most alive parts of ourselves. Think about it. Who were you before the world told you who to be? Before the shame, the expectations, the comparisons, you were imaginative, playful, curious. You were emotionally honest. You cried when you were sad. You danced when you were joyful. You asked questions, explored freely, and lived from your gut, not your script. That version of you isn't gone. It's just hidden. And reparenting isn't just about healing the wounds. It's about reclaiming the gifts. Jung called this the path to individuation, becoming whole by integrating all parts of the self, including the child. When you do this, you don't just survive. You create. You feel deeply. You become more human, not less. Many of our most meaningful traits come from this place: spontaneity, empathy, wonder, artistic expression, deep presence. But to access these qualities, the inner child needs to feel safe, because a child who had to grow up too fast will not trust joy easily. A child who was punished for expressing emotion will hesitate to speak up, and a child who felt invisible will struggle to believe their ideas matter. So, how do you nurture the gifts? You begin to play again, even if it feels silly. You let your imagination lead just for a few minutes a day. You trust your gut instead of outsourcing every decision. You paint, write, walk barefoot in the grass, not for productivity, but for connection. You allow yourself to feel alive again. And perhaps most importantly, you no longer shame the child for being sensitive, emotional, curious, or unsure. You welcome those traits. You let them guide you. The result? You stop living someone else's version of adulthood. You begin creating from a deeper, more authentic place, not a wounded identity, but a whole one. That's the paradox Jung understood so well. Your power doesn't come from pretending to be invulnerable. It comes from integrating the parts you were once told to hide. So if this journey into the psyche, into forgotten parts of yourself, resonates with you, if you've been longing for a deeper kind of healing, not just information, but transformation, then we invite you to subscribe. We explore these psychological truths, from Jung to Frankl to your own unconscious, every week. And if even one idea here helped you see yourself with more clarity or compassion, imagine what 1 month of this could do. You're not alone on this path. Let's walk it together. Healing doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means becoming someone you've never been allowed to be, whole. Carl Jung taught that the goal of inner work is not perfection, not happiness, not even peace, but wholeness, to bring together the broken, forgotten, and rejected parts of yourself into a unified self that no longer hides from life. So, what does wholeness actually feel like? It feels like being able to sit with yourself, in silence, without needing to escape. It feels like responding to life instead of reacting to your past. It feels like compassion for the parts of you that still ache. And even more radically, it feels like trusting yourself again. You no longer need to chase approval, because you've already given yourself permission to exist. You no longer seek constant distractions because you're no longer afraid of your own company. You no longer overachieve to feel worthy because you've stopped measuring your value in productivity. This is not a destination. This is a relationship. A relationship with yourself that is rooted in respect, softness, and honesty. Wholeness also means embracing contradiction. You are both strong and vulnerable, capable and scared, wounded and wise. There's no longer a need to exile any part of you, because every emotion, every fear, every longing, every memory has something to teach you. When the inner child speaks, you listen. When the inner critic shouts, you respond with boundaries, not shame. When the adult you leads, it does so with gentleness, not control. And something miraculous begins to happen. You become safe for yourself, and in that safety, your life starts to change. not dramatically but quietly. You begin to make choices that serve you, not sabotage you. You start attracting people who see the real you, because you finally see you. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That's the gift you give yourself when you commit to this journey. You stop surviving your story. You start rewriting it with awareness, compassion, and courage. So what now? Keep listening inward. Keep showing up, not as a perfect version of yourself, but as an honest one. The child in you doesn't need a hero. It needs you, present, curious, and willing to stay. And if this video helped you take even one small step toward that inner reunion, make sure you subscribe. Because this channel isn't just about psychology, it's about guiding you back to yourself, back to the parts you forgot, back to the voice you silenced, back to the wholeness you were born with. Your journey doesn't end here. It begins every day with your willingness to meet yourself fully. We'll be here for each step.